Go through who AEMO is. Violette did that yesterday. I'll just go straight into it. Okay, I really am not going to be using a lot of slides today. I'm going to be talking pretty much to this one slide because I think it contextualizes the discussion. We started on a little bit in the session with Nia about the importance of data in making decisions in policy. And I'll just go a little bit further into the depth about operations. And I mean operations from the next summer through to the next 7 days, through to the current time, and then how we settle the market and how we manage financial risk in the market as well. It covers that full dimension, and over the course of the evolution of the markets, there's a really strong set of changes that in some cases has required data to be sought and enabled to be shared across the market, and other cases where the data itself has driven changes because we've been able to do things. And I think some of those areas where we're going in the next 10 years, clearly data is going to remain at the core. It hasn't been at the core from the very beginning of when we decentralise the market to a certain extent. Running a power system and running an energy market all the way to settling and billing is really about multi-parties working together. In the day-to-day operations, you've got generators, networks. More increasingly, we have consumers playing roles with new technology. We also have them playing roles we had some discussion in the last thing about when not to make decisions about turning on appliances or air conditioning for their own, usually based on their own comfort or commercial or economic situations. So data has always been there, and a large part of what we do is source that data, share that data. We use the data for our own functions. We share that data with counterparts in the market. So on the data, you've got the dispatch processes that really bring in the information through some of those real-time systems. Every 3 or 4 seconds, they're bringing in the information, and that has enabled us. From the start, the SCADA wasn't new. SCADA data, like real-time data, was not a new thing, but how we used it changed how we could optimise the power system. The first few years, I was lucky enough to be working in power system operations, and on a weekly basis, you'd be having a discussion of, wow, that's interesting. I never thought we could run the power system like that. We started sourcing the data, throwing it into an optimization engine, which was new. You set the parameters, and all these new ways of running a power system, which might sound a little scary in a reliability and security sense, but they were valid, and it really showed the value and the efficiencies we could get from utilising the data that we already had at that point. That's progressed as we saw renewables coming in, driven by policy, and one thing we do need to, while consumers may sometimes feel disenchanted with policy, I'm certainly in that boat sometimes. In Australia, at least, we have the capability to influence it as consumers, and I think that's a real power in this room and this conference and the ECA in general, is that don't underestimate that power, and we'll come back to that in terms of system-wide operation. I just thought I'd go there for policy first. So as we look at what you've got on the screen there, we changed and brought in wind and solar at the high level. We needed data. How do we integrate wind? It's a good thing. So straight away we started more heavily integrating with our meteorological weather data sources. That's progressed. Solar came on. Again, we went a next step. Now, today we get stuff from satellites on a 10-minute basis because cloud cover is really important. That was driven not by the big end of town, the solar farms with the It was driven by consumers putting PV on their roof. It was starting, our demand forecasting wasn't matching with the consumer choices and consumption in the market. We had to adapt to that by bringing that information in, and that enables us now, with information we get from the Clean Energy Regulator, to make better decisions on how we're going to support what. Sorry, the screen went out. That's where I was getting confused. Where we have to go, what we need to source in the system. So as we go forward, I think the key pieces that we touched on this morning are really around what data can we use to drive the business models. We have policy coming up. Policy is being discussed at the moment around demand-side participation. Policy has just been made about visibility of distributed energy resources, and AEMO are now moving on to implementing a register of that information. But the availability of data influences that policy. We've been through a demand-side response consideration a few years ago. One of the biggest issues there is, yes, there are barriers, but the barriers and the outcomes that the business cases need to be underpinned by someone needs to be paid for that scenario. How can they do it? How can I know that somebody's used demand response, how they were procured to use it, on how that was sought? And data can solve those problems very quickly and easily. We had a lot of presentations yesterday on CDR, but there were some other areas from innovative approaches like Watt Watchers and other areas putting other data feeds in. The availability of that data can really be seen as an enabler and move through. I'm getting the slow sign. Jeez, it goes quick. I'll just flick on. All right. Good. Okay, so on to what we're doing, which is less talk, more action. All right, this year we're setting up the DER register, which is really about visibility of DER so we can start using it in our system-wide optimisations. And the key learning through that whole process is that it's engaging different parts for AEMO, which is we're really having to do a lot more engagement with installers, who are essentially the representatives of the consumers there, putting in that information. Then we move on to using that information in our trials. We're already running these virtual power plant trials, and then working with the networks and other industry people about how do we provide the opportunities that we know the technology can provide into the power system to make it more efficient and reduce the cost of energy and improve the reliability outcomes. And the last three that are on there, I think we've talked through a bit in previous sessions, so I'll move on and call it a day, and I look forward to the questions at the end of the panel. Thank you.